Today's episode is sponsored by Smart Travel, a new podcast from NerdWallet. You know that feeling when you're trying to book a trip, too many choices, too much fine print, no real way to know if you're actually getting the best deal? Smart Travel helps you skip that stress and book with confidence. NerdWallet's travel journalists break down the pros and cons of travel decisions, like when lounge access is worth paying for, how a travel agent could save you money, and which hotel loyalty programs give you the best value. So before you book, learn how to get the most out of your travel dollars. Follow Smart Travel on your favorite podcast app, and stay tuned later in the show for a special segment on travel.
There's a good chance you're dealing with a middleman, like me, when you get your medicines. That's because PBMs and insurers are often the same company. We even own big chain pharmacies and are buying your doctor's office. We decide what medicines you can get, where you get them, and how much you pay. It's a win-win. For me.
When middlemen own it all, you lose. Visit phrma.org/middlemen to learn more. Paid for by Pharma.
Hi, listeners. This is Dana Stevens, co-host of the Slate Culture Gabfest. I have a message for you this week. We are so sorry to tell you that a technical issue means we can't share a new episode with you this week. We actually recorded a new episode, and we're very excited to put it on the feed. And for technical reasons, it is not available. We're so sorry about that, but we do have a new Slate Plus available in the feed this week. In the meantime, we're going to rerun one of our favorite episodes from last year. It's the listener call-in show for 2024. This was actually released on January 1st of 2025, but we taped it a bit before that. The call-in show is a Culture Gabfest tradition where listeners have a few weeks to send us questions about whatever they want to know about, cultural or not. We compile those into a list of crowdsourced questions and pick some favorites to answer in an unstructured, freewheeling conversation. This year, that conversation included such listener questions as somebody asked us to talk about ephemeral media that doesn't typically get covered on the show. Somebody asked about cooking, which we always like to talk about, whether we ever cook just for ourselves and how we feel about solo cooking. And then I love this prompt from a listener. Is there a better song and movie pairing than Ghost, the good old Patrick Swayze movie Ghost, and Unchained Melody? We answer those and other questions on this year's listener call-in show. If you haven't heard that yet, maybe give it a listen now. And thanks for your patience. We will talk to you again with a new episode next week.
I'm Stephen Metcalf, and this is the Slate Culture Gabfest annual call-in show edition. It's Wednesday, January 1st. Dana, I can't say the next syllables. Will you say them for me?
2025,
no,
baby.
No, I'm still 40 years old.
The year in which only good things will happen, and nothing that happens in January could possibly permanently change all our lives.
Oh, damn. All right. Well, greetings, Julia Turner.
Hello.
How are we doing out there in sunny LA?
You know, we're good for reasons we don't need to get into. I'm recording in a blindfold today, so I just want everyone to know that. That's my approach to 2025, and let's see what it does for us.
Ostrich mode.
Yeah, when we were kind of warming up, you said I'm blindfolded and sitting in a chair, and I just thought of it's already Pinochet's chili here. I mean, it's...
Is there a light bulb hanging out of my head?
Today's newspaper with January 1st on it.
It's like a freaking Ariel Dorfman play. This is bad. It got dark.
I can't tell you if there's a light bulb on a string over my head because of the blindfold. Anyway, let's continue. Sorry, to those for whom that's confusing. I'm having a minor and hopefully unserious medical event. I just have a visual migraine, so I'm wearing a blindfold. I have not actually been kidnapped.
Let me do some proper introductions. You are Julia Turner. You are a fellow at the Annenberg Center for Journalism at USC and co-founder of this enterprise.
Hello, hello.
Hello, hello. And of course, Dana Stevens, who's sitting across from me delightfully, is the film critic for Slate. Hey, Dana.
Hey, I just wanted to let everyone know I have an actual Madeleine in my hand, a la Proust. So if any questions come up about our childhood or reaching back into our deep past, it's nibble time.
Shove it in the maw. I love it. All right. So I think we just dive right in. I'll just say, by way of brief introduction, enormous affection for this minor institution in Gabfestiana. It's like the summer strut. It's the solstice. What do you even call it? Q&A
solstice stroll.
There we go. And the solstice mosey. Let's start by listening to one of the calls that we got anonymously, but a fetching little question, and we'll take a turn at answering it.
Hi, Culture Gabfest. I'm interested in each of your relationships with the types of cultural products that are less widely available or create less permanent documentation, and therefore are the kinds of things you're less likely to talk about on the show. I'm thinking dance, performance art, plays. Thanks so much. Love what you all do. Bye-bye.
Yeah, I love this question. So thanks to the listener who called it in. Actually, Steve, you and I were just talking about trying to do opera on the show next year. We have an opera-loving friend who's been a guest on the show before who was saying, why don't you do opera? I'll take you to an opera at the Met and come on and talk about it, which sounds like so much fun. But I think, and let's talk about this not just in relation to that plan, but to this question, I think that to do that on a show that, like our show, can be heard all over the world by anyone at any time is a little trickier. And that's the reason why, though we could talk in our personal lives about what our relationship is to, live performance and the like, it's a little bit more difficult to do on the show. We try, for example, only to talk about a Broadway play if it's a play that's likely to tour or be made into a movie, or it's such a big thing like Hamilton that everyone is talking about it and listening to the cast album. We try not to do sort of, we live in coastal urban cities and you don't type topics, I think that just doesn't have the reach and the generosity of talking about something that people have an actual chance of experiencing. So that covers maybe why we don't do as much live performance on the show. But I'm interested as well in what part those arts play in you guys' lives.
Yeah, I remember, so I grew up in a family with my mother's mother who was the first person in her family to go to college. She went to Hunter College in the 1920s in New York, and she was part of a German immigrant family for whom culture was important, right? So she would take us every year to see the ballet, to see the symphony, to see theater. And I loved those experiences growing up because they were special times with my grandmother. I also was sort of mystified, the question of what are you supposed to do? What are you supposed to get out of it? How does it work? It was cool to be exposed to as a kid. And I still love going to all three of those types of performance. And I feel like my relationship to each of them has changed over time. Theater is the most easy to transpose to the other watching experiences I have of film and television. It's like plot, character, action, words to interpret. I'm very comfortable with my skills doing that, and the sort of ephemeral charge of just being in a room and having it be this one special night that is a certain way is fun, but is ultimately not that different to me. For me, it's dance and pure musical performance that are the more alien to me and thus more intriguing. And I do think it's a real sadness that there's just so much less culture coverage of that type of work. Every time I go see a dance, I want to think about it because I'm so moved by it, but moved not in the usual ways where I feel like I can interpret it myself. I'm literally, what was that? What was it referring to? Why did it seem new? Why did it seem old? Old like what? I'm so illiterate about dance that I feel like I want more and better criticism with regard to it once I finish experiencing it, and it's just really hard to come by these days.
I love this question. I love the idea of evanescence and permanence in the arts, and the idea that before there was writing, there was poetry, right? Which we, by definition, we know because of Homer, and something that might have been evanescent, that might have been authored over a millennium by God knows how many, co-authored by God knows how many chanters and repeaters of it, and then becomes permanently, it goes from a state of evanescence to permanence with human writing. It's just so primal about who we are to think about that dialectic and how it plays out. We saw one of my favorite plays, Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf, and I'm embarrassed to admit I didn't know who Tracy Letts was when we saw that production. He played George in that particular version of the show, and he's of course a renowned playwright who won the Pulitzer for Osage County. He leveled me with that performance, absolutely leveled me. And it's just something I can only describe now. I can't point to it in any concrete way to other people. And I think that there's a kind of beauty to that in a way. And of course, it converts into a fetish of you had to be there, right? Which people lord over you if they saw the Clash at Bonds in 1981 or whatever year it was, or, I was there when, or I went up Whitney Avenue and I saw this band called Nirvana and there were 8 people there. And 6 months later, they put out In Utero, which I can claim to have done only because a friend of mine did it. And I was like, yeah, I'm too tired, man. Never heard of them. So I actually didn't do it. But I love regional theater for that reason. You go and see an absolutely astonishing performance where an actress appears to have just ripped her guts out on stage for an audience of 140 people, maybe in the hopes that there's an agent sitting in the audience, but otherwise simply because they're a practitioner of a craft that they believe in, and it has no trace at all in the world, leaves none. Open mic nights are very moving in that sense. That moment when the guy sang Just Like a Woman at karaoke, when we all did it together, this sort of very normie looking guy may have even been wearing a suit, and he just killed it, turned it into his own and very beautiful rendition, disappeared forever from history. I'd add one more. I had one amazing You Had to Be There, and I didn't even know it at the time, but I had a friend. I was an Upper East Side dweeb. I had a friend who could hit the clubs and he'd always get in. He'd just walk up to the Velvet Road and in you go. And I drafted on him for a number of years. And one night in 1982, and now I can look at the internet and see what night it was, we went early. This is early in 1982, right? The words hip hop. There was probably, I mean it when I say maybe there were under 100 white people in America who knew what that referred to. And we go in, and the Ritz is, back then, it was called the Ritz, and now it's called Webster Hall. So now quite a, people who've been to Webster Hall can picture it, multi-story, club. We get some drinks and it's like packed and I'm exhilarated and I'm a nerd in like dorky sneakers and somehow I got in and whatever. And then the sound from the stage, it was Grandmaster Flash and the Furious Five. And you're like, all of those feelings all at once, like, okay, I'm about to be Darwined out of existence, and it is the most just thing to ever happen in the history of the universe, right? Like all of my preoccupations with music and cultural hierarchies, they don't mean fucking anything going forward. And that was an amazing feeling to watch that. And there's a flyer for sale from that night from the Village Voice, November 2nd, 1982. 1982, beginning of new school hip-hop rap music, Grandmaster Flash and the Furious Five at the Ritz. It's just fucking crazy, right? And there's no record of that performance. But I get to own that moment in some way that I wouldn't if I was like, the first time I heard Fleetwood Mac's Rumors or whatever. And you know what I mean? It's like, it has it's scalability in some sense. So anyway, this is a subject much dearer and nearer to my heart than I thought it was, but what a great, wonderful question.
Well, summer is coming, the temperature is rising, and it is time to start thinking about a different wardrobe. If you live in a small apartment like me, maybe you're hauling out your summer clothes that are in storage and putting your winter clothes away in storage. If it is time for you to upgrade your summer wardrobe, think about giving it an update with Quince. Their pieces are easy, elevated, and will make you feel more put together without even trying. As far as summer Quince, I would probably say that the item I will wear the most will be one of my silk skirts from them. They really do have beautifully priced and very nice silk products. Quince manages to make luxurious items like that affordable by working with top artisans and cutting out the middlemen, so you get the luxury without the markup. They also only work with factories that use safe, ethical, and responsible manufacturing practices and premium fabrics and finishes. So treat your closet to a summer glow up with Quince. Go to quince.com/culture for free shipping on your order and 365-day returns. That's QUINCE.com/culture to get free shipping and 365-day returns. Quince.com/culture. This podcast is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Do you ever find yourself playing the budgeting game, shifting a little money here, a little there, and hoping it all works out? Well, with the Name Your Price tool from Progressive, you can be a better budgeter and potentially lower your insurance bill, too. You tell Progressive what you want to pay for car insurance, and they'll help you find options within your budget. Try it today at Progressive.com. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Price and coverage match limited by state law. Not available in all states.
If there's one thing to learn from the entertainment industry, it's just how easy it is to earn a reputation, even if it doesn't reflect who celebrities really are. For example, everybody thinks that Discover is a card that isn't widely accepted, but in reality, it's accepted at 99% of places that take credit cards nationwide. Yeah, 99%. So maybe now you'll think twice before judging a book by its cover. Unless it's a celebrity cookbook, in that case, judge away. Based on the February 2024 Nielsen report, learn more at discover.com/credit card.
Hi, love your show. I listen every week from Switzerland, and I love to hear your thoughts on food and cooking. I was just paging through this really cute cookbook by the British novelist Michelle Roberts called French Cooking for One, and it was so fun and indulgent and joyful when it came to the idea of cooking for yourself. It made me think of Microwave Cooking for One, which was the Cooking for One cookbook I grew up with, which kind of made me afraid of ever being alone because of the abject misery it projected. So my question is, do you guys ever cook for just yourselves? Is it different than when you cook for other people? Is it joyful or like sad and terrible? Love your show. Thanks.
Well, I mean, I think I often cook for myself for lunch or for like a late breakfast. Like sometimes I'll have like a protein bar and coffee in the morning and then get a couple hours of work done. And then I'll emerge hungry mid-morning and I'll make myself some like breakfast tacos or some scrambled egg, or I'll make Dana's famous thyme toast that she taught me about when she saw the thyme plants in my yard. Which is
Thyme toast forever.
Thyme toast forever. Did I tell you I made it for Plots when he visited last month?
Oh my goodness! I think we have to tell our listeners what thyme toast is.
Sorry.
Real quick.
Well, Dana, here, drop your recipe, which is an awesome cooking for yourself recipe.
Okay, so I happened to be visiting Julia at her beautiful house in LA, where she has an incredible garden, and she had this lush, many herbs, but this lush kind of thyme plant, and was saying, I don't know what to do with all this thyme, and so I told her about my sort of invention, sort of adaptation from other things I had read about, which is thyme toast. So you take some good bread, preferably sort of like a rough, crusty kind of bread. You can toast it or not. Then you put something cheesy on top, like farmer's cheese, cream cheese, something with protein. Ricotta is nice. Then you sprinkle some thyme, just loose thyme leaves on it. And then at the end, if you want a touch of sweetness, you can add some honey. And it's the best breakfast. It touches it's got the sweet, the salty, the savory. Have that with a cup of coffee or tea, and you're good for the day.
It's delish and does help you use up your bushels of time if you're in a position where you've got bushels of time with the H. And yeah, so I'm cooking for myself, but I do think the sort of cooking for one cookbooks, they come with this cultural implication of like, you have no one to cook for, and thus you need this, as opposed to like, sometimes in life, you're just making something for your own pleasure. And I really love it. Like, it feels like a form of self-care. I like things a little bit spicier than most of my immediate and honestly extended family. I have a particular soup that I cook for myself when I'm sick called sick soup that nobody else likes, where I will chop up onion, saute it with a shit ton of red pepper flake and some dried rosemary that's really astringent, and some salt and pepper, add mushrooms and carrots. Once it gets all sauteed down, cover it in like an inch or two of chicken broth, and then separately I'll boil up some egg noodles, and then I'll pour this like super spicy brew over the egg noodles. I like the really wide ones, and put some parm and parsley and salt and pepper on top. And like, nobody likes this dish but me. But anytime I feel I'm getting a cold, I'm like, so I'm out of dinner. You all fend for yourself for dinner. I'm making myself sick soup. And it feels like not just delicious, but this like little ritual of like taking care of myself. So I enjoy cooking for one, but maybe that's easier to do in a context where I'm full of a house of people that I can and do cook for on other occasions.
I actually have a personal story about how I kind of learned to love to cook for myself. I mean, I lived alone for many, many years, so I always cooked for myself just because that was how you get food to eat. But At that time, I don't think I particularly liked cooking. I don't think I had even conceptualized that I didn't like it. I think I just didn't have the patience. You know, I was a young person with other things on my mind, and I would throw together 2 or 3 dishes reliably, and that was it. So flash forward to many years later, during the kind of height of COVID period, or maybe not quite the height, because it was the period when people were starting to leave their bubbles and maybe at least visit family. So there was this week during winter at sort of, height of pre-vaccine COVID when I was by myself in the house. The rest of my family, my husband and child, went to go visit her grandparents and do some other things, basically sort of get out of the house because I was trying to finish my book. And I was all alone. And because of sort of shopping rules during COVID, we just shopped once a week. So I was at home with a full fridge and nobody else there. And I feel like I sort of learned to cook in that week. I kind of learned to be patient. I think I learned a technique that I couldn't have learned when I was younger and rushing around throwing things together, which was, oh, wait, if you actually pay attention to what you're doing and stay in the kitchen the whole time and think about what would make it taste better, you can become a better cook. And it wasn't like I was consulting cookbooks or anything. In fact, I was pretty much making, familiar recipes I'd made before. But I started to sort of figure out techniques and realize that, whatever, things could marinate or you could pre-chop something and have it ready. And, just the whole mise en place idea. Obviously had read about these things or seen them on cooking shows. But, that moment when you experientially kind of incorporate something. And I don't think that could have happened if I wasn't alone for that week, because when you're in the midst of family life, you're just trying to get food on the table and rushing through it. But because I was in this kind of contemplative place of, alone with a full fridge, can't get any more food for the moment, I made some really good dishes that week and sort of learned some techniques that I still use. And I would say I love cooking for myself. I just love being by myself. People talk about eating out by yourself and do you feel embarrassed that you're sitting in a restaurant by yourself?
Nothing
People will think
better.
you have no friends. It's the most absurd thing I've ever heard. And if anyone is listening who has that phobia, get over it right away and experience life's greatest experience, sitting at a bar with a book, eating dinner by yourself.
Oh my God. I'm so glad you added the book. I was about to say, bring a paperback. It's heaven. I, like you, Dana, I love being alone. And therefore, I love cooking alone. And what I would say is that I'm an okay cook if I do exactly that. I pay attention, and I pretty much need to follow a recipe pretty much to the letter. But I'm a genius at satisfying myself with what my kids like to call sad lunch or sad dinner, where you bake a sweet potato, open a tin of sardines, boil an egg. You just have here's what I have. I have a handful of almonds, some kind of a starch that I can make very quickly, some sort of sad, environmentally sound protein item, and you throw them together with a little something green. And to me, for some reason, it gives me a feeling of self-control and zen. So
yeah, the larder raid, we call that kind of dinner. I love a larder raid.
Yeah, well, it's interesting too, because Dana, aren't you in a house where your partner is the lead chef usually? So maybe you needed this solitude space to reconnect with your cooking self.
Yeah. And I would even go so far as to say that that's changing. I'm not going to say it's all because of that one week, but I think when we had a kid who was small, because he was faster at cooking and sort of more able to efficiently get food made, he was the main cook. And now that she is in college and independent, yeah, I would say that I'm the main person who gets an idea and makes a recipe, makes food. So I kind of appreciate that has shifted. I'm glad that I discovered cooking before I was too old to enjoy doing it.
No, I feel like I got to construe that lesson into my own household, because I feel like both my husband and I, he loves food and loves reading recipes and loves restaurants and is full of suggestions for things to make and is a very capable cook, but I tend to just drive the cooking. And I've also noticed in midlife, it's fun, the things that improve in midlife. I'm just a much better cook than I was 15 years ago. I understand technique on this intuitive level. I can invent things in a way, the whatever you make of the 10,000 hours thesis and however bogus and business schoolified it may have become, I've notched it. And now I just have this intuition in the kitchen that I didn't have before. So I have a set of growth that's happening in the kitchen, but maybe it's coming at the expense of letting him play more often there. So anyway, it's something to keep in mind.
All right, guys, where are we going next? Should we do the song pairing one now?
I was wondering if there is a better song and movie pairing than Ghost and Unchained Melody. Thank you.
Just to be completely of my generation, I feel like one of the iconic ones is the end of The Breakfast Club and Don't You Forget About Me by, I think, Simple
Fist
Minds.
Pump. Yeah.
With the fist pump. Like, that song, you never hear that song. I mean, I suppose that song is like a less great song than Unchained Melody in the scheme of things. Oh, God. Also, what about the entire Pulp Fiction soundtrack? Dusty Springfield, Son of a Preacher Man. Like, I guess I'm just dropping my 90s themes, but those are the two that come to mind.
Yeah, the first one I thought of in terms of a song that has become wedded to a moment that it's used in a movie and you can't unhear it after that was Layla, Eric Clapton's Layla in the Goodfellas montage, the end of Goodfellas, or near the end at the moment that the mob war is starting and there's
no
this
spoilers,
really gruesome
guys.
montage.
I haven't seen Goodfellas.
Oh my
There's a mob war as a spoiler in Goodfellas. That's the subject of the entire movie.
I mean, it's true that I haven't seen it, but please go on and describe anything.
Julia, there are Italians in it too. Sorry to get so spoilery. There's a moment that violent things of a sort that shall remain unspecified are happening in Goodfellas, and this beautiful. It specifically is the kind of musical break in the middle of Layla where the song gets very instrumental and kind of contemplative, and it's one of Scorsese's specialties that everyone tries to rip off and no one else can do it as well, which is the ironic juxtaposition of music and image. That to me is so wedded, right? That just is where Layla lives now in my mind. And then the other I would point to, and it's not a movie, but the TV show Freaks and Geeks. Every single pop song that's used in that show is now wedded to the show for me. And when I hear that piece of music, well, the way that show does it is particularly smart because there's generally one musical artist for each episode. So there's like the episode that uses only Billy Joel songs, the episode that uses only Grateful Dead songs, and just uses them so perfectly with the content of the show that they all remain there in my mind.
Oh, wow. Those are all so good. All right, I'll throw out a couple. Fight the Power, Public Enemy on the opening credits of Do the Right Thing is eternal. I mean, he gets your heart beating at that pace, and then it doesn't stop till the end of the movie. Rosie Perez, of course, shadow boxing with your own face, the viewer's face through the whole sequence. You know, and she's not yet. I mean, she wasn't a star when those credits open. She was a star by the time they were done. And then, speaking of Pulp Fiction, of course, there's that moment in Reservoir Dogs where Stuck in the Middle with You comes on during the torture scene with that needle drop. Is just the audience just guffaws, engulfed in laughter.
And that's an in-story needle drop, right?
Yeah.
Doesn't Michael Madsen put the song on before he starts torturing?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it's all the sadism of arguably Quentin Tarantino and the protagonist are all coming together in one. I don't like that movie. I don't like Tarantino, but nor do I like Wes Anderson. And I really just like the movie Rushmore, but the closing credit use of Ooh La La by Ronnie Lane and Ronnie Wood.
Oh, I love Rushmore. We've talked about Rushmore before, but I think the whole soundtrack of Rushmore is kind of it's a big keeper. It's one of the few soundtracks I listen to just as a record at home.
One more, just if we're expanding to TV, one more that I loved. I do think The Bear in general has great music supervision and great needle drops, but the moment in Forks when we see the Eben Moss-Bachrach character sort of fall in love with discipline and finally understand what Carmi's going for, and then the song as he drives home is Love Story by Taylor Swift, is so perfect. It's just like the best juxtaposition. There are Taylor Swift songs about performance and perfection, and instead it's this song about passion and love and happy endings and hope. And it's a great one.
You had to kill the mood.
That's also an in-story one, as I remember, right, Julia? His daughter, it's been established that his daughter's a Taylor Swift fan, and he's trying to get tickets for them. And he puts it on, knows it's on, and sings along with it. And that's part of what makes it just integrates so perfectly into his
well, and
personal story.
I think he's accepting that the daughter's going to go to the Taylor Swift concert with his ex's new
That's
beau,
right.
Right? His ex's new beau came through with the tickets or something. Anyway,
that's one of the best individual episodes of The Bear, which is one of those shows that really varies episode to episode.
Agreed.
It's the moment in the Slate Culture Gabfest when we discuss business. This week, our only piece of business has to do with the same thing as our main show, call-ins. So we got one question from a listener about pottery, about our relationships to pottery and ceramics that we went so hog wild on. I would never have thought that Julia in particular had so many pottery opinions, but then that got me and Steve going as well, and it turned into this whole conversation about housewares and comfort and domestic space, and it was really fun and lively, and we kept saying, but now we're done, but wait! So we thought because we went so long, our Slate Plus listeners might enjoy hearing that as a separate segment. So if you're a Slate Plus member, you'll hear us going on and on about ceramics this week. And if you're not, you can become one by going to slate.com/cultureplus. When you're a member, you get ad-free podcasts. You get bonus content like us ranting about ceramics for close to half an hour. And of course, you get unlimited access to all of the writing and all of the podcasting on Slate. When you're a member, you're really part of what's keeping the show and the whole magazine afloat. So please sign up today at slate.com/cultureplus. Once again, that's slate.com/cultureplus. Or you can subscribe on Apple Podcasts by clicking Try Free at the top of our show page. All right, back to the show.
Hi, Culture Gabfest. So I am calling from Philadelphia. I have a question to you about making new friends. So most of my friends throughout my life have been made either from school or at work. And now I'm in a situation where I'm no longer in school. My work is largely solitary, and many of my friends in the city have moved away. So I'd like to hear you guys talk about how do you make new friends as an adult? And I'm not really a sporty, exercisey person, so preferably no non-sports venues for recommendations. No rock climbing gyms for me. I'd love to hear each of you tell the story of how you made your most recent friend.
All right, why don't I nab that one? Because for a couple of reasons. One is that I think I've said this before on the show, a unexpected revelation of living upstate was the totally different principle on which you make friends and then sustain friendships, which is, you know, in the city, you can just, in a large metropolis like New York City, you can just swipe left, swipe left, swipe left. And then at the end of the day, this culling, massive culling process, you have these people with whom the affinity is just really obvious. And you can still swipe left for a while, and then it takes, and then, you know, and then what you do is you rotate through and you see people, some people quite a lot and some people less frequently, but then you've got this portfolio of friends, and very often you see some people you quite love once every 6 months, and you sit down at dinner and you perform and regurgitate and have an amazing time, and then you don't see them for another 6 months, right? That I wouldn't say that's everyone's paradigm of urban friendship, but it's a version of it, I think, for a lot of people. When you're in a tiny pond, rural pond, your neighbors, a lot of, I don't know, propinquity, is that the word? And kismet. Propinquity and kismet tend to produce friendships, unexpected friendships. And for the first time in my life, I became friends with some people who were substantially older than I was, which was wonderful. I'll give you one in particular, which is we had a power line fight up where I was very soon after we'd finished tarting up this old farmhouse and thought we were really in for it. We thought the state was going to literally eminent domain some of our land and put a high tension or whatever it is, the high voltage power line right through us would reduce our house value to zero. And in fact, we would have just moved back to the city at that point, totally defeated. It was really horrible. And my wife led the effort to just defeat it, which everyone told her was impossible, and she did it. And from that moment on, we had a totally different relationship to our community and also to our neighbors who joined us in that fight, two different couples in particular. I would say my most recent serious friend is the husband of one of those two couples. He's about 20 years older than I am, a retired architect who led a fascinating life in New York City back when New York was genuinely cool, right? And essentially went to RISD with the Talking Heads and dated Tina Weymouth, and they all moved en masse to the city. And he started his firm with Tina Weymouth's brother. And so he was just part of that moment and never mythologizes or self-mythologizes. You have to drag it out of him. An incredible person. And I'll just tell you, I think the most distinctive story where our friendship really got cemented. At the time, I was an annoying vegetarian, and it annoyed the shit out of him because he's sort of he styles himself a gruff man's man. He's full of shit. He's a little gooey caramel nougat about 2 inches beneath the crust, but he was still fronting that he was this, like, you know, anyway, man's man who thought I was just the funniest little, you know, whatever. And he was a heavy smoker, no filter, roll your own smoker kind of guy, like chain. And at the time, this was probably a decade ago, he's 70 or whatever, and he's just got a chronic, vicious, phlegmy cough. And you're like, I'm going to lose this friend practically right after making him. It was terrible. And one day we're at brunch with this they actually aren't proper British couple. They're an incredibly improper British couple. But for the purposes of this anecdote, there was this determination among all of us that we were going to have an intervention with our friend, but it would have to go through his wife, and there were proper ways to do it, and they were going to take the lead. And out of nowhere, my friend Peter is hacking, and out of nowhere, the husband in the British couple says, "Oh, for fuck's sake, Peter, what will it take to get you to stop smoking?" And Peter, without pausing, says, "I'll give up smoking if he eats meat." And he points at me, and I said, "Pass the chicken." And I picked up a drumstick, ate a drumstick. First time my lips had touched meat in 23 years. And then I like dropped it like I dropped the mic. And I said, "I guess you're no longer a smoker." He hasn't had a cigarette since, and I am a happy omnivore. And from that moment on, we were just freaking buddies.
Oh, that's a really good meet cute friendship story.
Meet cute. I saw what you did there.
Oh, I wasn't even trying for a pun. All right,
Anyway.
Julia, who's your most recent friend? Can you beat Steve? Have you made one more recently than 10 years?
I have. I mean, I only moved here 6 years ago. So obviously I have some pre-existing friends out here, but have built a whole world in LA. I have a couple thoughts on this. One is I coming into the LA Times as a senior management boss type created a different like when you enter the building as a boss, you can't actually make friends with people. Like the boss can never quite be the friend. You can be friendly, you can be supportive, but there actually is a structure and kind of distinction that you have to maintain there, I think, to do the management part of the job well. And that was, different with my evolution at Slate, where I started as a pup and there were people that I became the boss of who I had been comrades in arms with, and I had to sort of navigate that in all of those relationships. But I have so many wonderful colleagues from the LA Times and had so many good times with them. But the kind of like trust and intimacy outside of the workplace was harder to develop in that context. So it's been fun since I left to sort of just like declare some of them true friends. And I had a couple colleagues there who I guess a move that I've done a couple times where I knew someone in a kind of not friendish context is to just declare at the point where I want to be friends with them, like, okay, so from now on, we're just actually friends. Like, I think we should be friends, like to literally say it out loud. And it sort of like releases whatever the other relationship was and declares like an intent of kind of trust and intimacy that is sort of lovely. And so I've successfully pulled that move a couple of times in creating some friends out of kind of more distant acquaintances or people I met through other contexts where it wasn't clear that friendship was the obvious next step. In terms of non-sporting activities, I do think like being a little bit of a joiner probably does help, especially if you have more of a solitary existence. So I, and there's plenty of things to do that aren't athletic. I would always recommend birding. I went once to a paper marbling class and met some other cool people there. Like there's just so many activities in the world. There's all these board game nights, there's readings. I think the thing that's tricky with those is you have to kind of be patient. Like I remember going to some mom groups with my daughter during that maternity leave and was kind of looking for community and met a lot of nice ladies, but, none of those turned into ongoing relationships. Like you have to be patient, I think, to find folks in those contexts. And then the other thing I would say is like, let yourself be collected. Like sometimes people want to introduce you to people. And another friend I've made here recently is someone who I was introduced to, who is maybe 20 or 30 years older than me and is just like a true, I keep dropping the Malcolm Gladwell references today. I guess that guy's got something, but like a true connector collector who in an old school way is like, I'm throwing a dinner and there's these people coming and I want to introduce you to so-and-so. And, you can, those people serve an important social function and So figure out who in your life knows those people in your world and let yourself become one of the colors on their social palette, and they'll throw you in different places. I've met a lot of cool new people through this one friend. So, okay, declare friendship, do non-sports hobbies, let yourself be collected. Oh, and then I do think the generational pieces that Steve mentioned is important too. Like friends who are 10, 20 years older or 10, 20 years younger, everything is suddenly fair game in midlife in a really lovely way.
Yeah, I'll use the generational link to say, to go to my story of my most recent friend, who I know I made almost exactly 7 years ago because we just had her for Thanksgiving with her husband and family, part of her family. And I was saying, do you know that our 7-year friend anniversary is coming up? And this friend of 7 years is 17 years younger than me. But as you say, Julia, there's a certain point where that doesn't seem to matter. And we basically seem to be occupying the same phase of life. But there's a specific day, I guess our kind of meet cute is that upon vaguely knowing each other, I asked her to come to a film screening, a press screening with me of Phantom Thread, Paul Thomas Anderson's Phantom Thread, which I love. It was my first time seeing it. It's one of my favorite now of his movies. And I sort of knew that we were going to be close when we walked out of the movie, and we didn't even have to discuss it. Like, we went straight to dinner and we both just immediately acknowledged, like, well, that was a masterpiece. Anyway, what's up with you? And later on did discuss the movie. But, we both sort of wanted to respect the sacredness of having seen this beautiful movie together and both kind of getting it together. How I made that friend, I guess in a way it's a job connection, but it's that she is a writer and journalist and I just admired her work. So, this is something that makes me miss Twitter because that was the way that I was able to sort of get in touch with her through DMs and say, hey, I love your work. And, gradually we sort of became online friends and then eventually went to the screening together in real life. And so I'm not sure, this is sort of like pulling the ladder up behind you because that way of making friends isn't quite as easy anymore. Not that there aren't social media platforms with direct messaging on them. But, the idea that there's just sort of a central bulletin board you can go to and find somebody because they are a good writer and then eventually get to know them. But the idea that you can just see somebody's writing out there and there's a sort of central messaging place, a bulletin board that you can just go reliably find anyone and maybe get in touch with them is less true than it was at the time. So I'm not sure that's exactly a path to getting to know someone, but it is, I think, possible to use the internet if there's somebody out there who's doing work that you think is interesting and they live near you. I mean, I don't know. Ultimately, this friend and I might have gotten to know each other anyway, just through the common social circles of being people writing about culture in New York. But yeah, it was sort of social media that got us together, even though it wasn't through her tweets that I first wanted to be her friend.
I know social media 1.0-ish was so innocent comparatively. As a travel writer, I'd sort of send out a flare to a city via a friend, you know what I mean? Or say I'm going to a city. I'm going to Helsinki, for example. Does anyone in my Facebook group, anyone know someone there? And lo and behold, I went and hung out with a person for the entire time I was there, showed me her city and met her boyfriend in her social circle and had the freaking time of my life. It's like, imagine, I don't even know what the equivalent now would be.
It almost seems like my colleagues are saying that sometimes technology is good. The other thing I would just throw in too, I forget, Steve or Dana, which of you it was who exhorted our listeners to get over their fear of eating in a bar alone and to embrace one of life's best experience. Like, I think an important thing to remember about midlife friendship is that it's hard for everyone. I mean, maybe not everyone. And if you want to write in and tell us about how you're so seamlessly making friends left, right, and center, go for it. But I feel like after my maternity leave out here, and as we were coming out of the pandemic, I was sort of like, okay, I got to make an effort. Like figuring out how to cement and set up these like proto friendships in LA is almost like being, a single person on the apps looking for a partner. It's like, you got to put in the work. You got to like sit down at the beginning of every few months and be like, what are the dates that I could have a dinner? And then you got to email all the people who you've said you might have dinner with and put it down and like book the babysitting and make like, you have to treat it. You have to like really cultivate the field, And I remember as I was starting to do that, I was thinking of that as like a personal quest. Like I'm in this unusual position of having moved to the city right before the pandemic and then experienced a loss and a birth and a leave. And I was like, I'm the one coming out of hibernation back into the social world. And then at every single one of those dinners I set up or hikes or whatever, everyone else is like, I'm just trying to find people. I'm so glad you reached out. Like people, everyone gets narrowed into just the concerns of managing their lives, and everyone's pretty grateful. And sometimes you connect and sometimes you don't. And I think there's also that like beautiful midlife comfort of like, you are a person who is a good friend, has known great friendship, has known great relationships, and you're open to it, and to sort of not take it personally if it doesn't click or it doesn't work out or you don't get the thing on the books, or you do and it's kind of just like, okay, we had a nice dinner, but it doesn't feel like we're going to have 20 dinners more in the next 5 years. Like, just try to cultivate that like centeredness and directness, which I think comes back around to the just like, okay, is it time for us to be friends now? I think we should transition this into a real friendship. Like, when do you want to hang out? Like, I think people find that directness kind of disarming.
Yeah, you have to be willing to be vulnerable, right? Like, which I wouldn't say is my strong suit. And you have to put yourself out and accept that it might not go great.
I remember doing that with Jody Rosen, actually, friend of the show. Like a moment when we were colleagues and there was some Slate event that we had fun at and we were walking to the train. And there was this dorky moment where I just said to him, could we be actual friends? And I think we exchanged numbers at that moment. And now we're no longer work colleagues, but actual friends.
If there's one thing to learn from the entertainment industry, it's just how easy it is to earn a reputation, even if it doesn't reflect who celebrities really are. For example, everybody thinks that Discover is a card that isn't widely accepted, but in reality, it's accepted at 99% of places that take credit cards nationwide. Yeah, 99%. So maybe now you'll think twice before judging a book by its cover. Unless it's a celebrity cookbook, in that case, judge away. Based on the February 2024 Nielsen report, learn more at discover.com/credit card.
This podcast is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. You chose to hit play on this podcast today? Smart choice. Progressive loves to help people make smart choices. And that's why they offer a tool called Auto Quote Explorer that allows you to compare your Progressive car insurance quote with rates from other companies. So you can save time on the research and can enjoy savings when you choose the best rate for you. Give it a try after this episode at Progressive.com. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Not available in all states and situations. Prices vary based on how you buy.
Okay, so the next one we're going to do does not have an audio clip attached, but it's a great question. It's from Gary, listener Gary. What do the following people have in common? Bill Clinton, Martin Luther King, Carl Icahn, Susan Sontag, Susan Sarandon. You would think nothing. No, they all studied philosophy in college or were philosophy majors. Given our times and frequent appeals to notions like freedom and autocracy, democracy, woke, there's very little discussion of studying the deeper meaning, if not origin, of these terms. Why is that? Why is philosophy not studied more, referenced more when its terms are thrown around with abandon? Gary concludes with, who studies philosophy? Would it make a difference if more people did? Julia.
Okay, I'm so glad someone sent this question in because I think we've talked so much about philosophy on this show, or rather we've heard Steve talk so much about the philosophy he's reading on this show and drawn from his philosophical insights about the things we discuss. I also think it's suspicious that there's no audio and that we can't prove that Steve didn't just create a dummy account to send this in. But I'm so glad to talk about it in the abstract. I mean, on the one hand, these are the macro questions of life that have, I think, otherwise been considered through religion or maybe through poetry and literature. Like, why are we here? How do we think about our responsibilities, our gifts, morality, ethics? I mean, it's all the meat. And I remember thinking myself interested in that kind of thing as a kind of curious and philosophical kid. And I got to college and I took a political theory class my freshman year with like a star professor, John Tomasi, who was like a swashbuckling lecturing hottie who gave, vivacious lectures about Kant and Mill and whatever. And then I went and studied history for a few years. And then I took like the 200 level political theory class a couple years later. And I was just like, we were reading I think it was Kant. And we just were kind of given the text and expected to like think in the abstract about his ideas. And I was like, what the fuck? Like, when was he writing? What was the context? What was it? Like, I had accidentally become a historian in my history studies, and I completely lost the ability to be like, let's just hover up on this spectral plane and think about abstractions of human behavior and morality. And I don't know. I will also say, can you reread that list of people? Bill Clinton, Susan Sarandon, who else?
Steve Martin was on there.
He does later talk about Steve Martin, Susan Sontag, who was no piker, Susan Sarandon, who perhaps
okay. If you add Steve Martin to the list, that's complicating because I do love him, but it's like the club that Bill Clinton and Susan Sarandon are in. Like, I don't know, man. A lot of people who went hard at philosophy in college were like annoying.
A lot of people in college are annoying.
That's true too.
Let's abolish it.
Anyway, so I want to hear. I just sort of find the pure abstraction. Nothing's abstract. Everything's grounded in reality and context, and so I find it like a language that is not my favorite interpretive lens. But I'm dying to hear from you, Steve, your thoughts on this. Would it be better if I took philosophy more seriously and if everyone did?
I was going to defer to Dana, but I think I'm only going to get more volcanically angry as this segment goes on. So I think time to let the steam off. I mean, first of all, I can't account for why it was poorly taught. That's a shame. That's different from it being somehow inconsequential because it's abstract. And the second thing I would say is, you make what would have been or can possibly be a valid distinction between, kind of completely contextless, abstraction and the concrete nature and very contingent nature of history as it unfolds. I would say that philosophy multiple times, key times in its history, has totally transcended that. All of Hegel's work is about history and understanding history from the point of view of philosophy and vice versa. And then to a titanic influence that all of us feel and live out, whether we even know his name, Michel Foucault completely rethought of philosophy as something involving history in a much more micro and concrete way than, for example, Hegel did. And I just this morning coincidentally read an interview with Judith Butler in El País, in which, she's just been named one of the most important thinkers in the world. I mean, these lists are silly and she says so, but philosophy does matter. You can say that it shouldn't matter. You can say it doesn't interest you, but it does shape our world. Foucault, coming to the United States of America, gave us theory, critical theory, literary theory as we know it. She cites him as one of her biggest influences. In fact, her biggest influence, she says, after Hegel and Freud. Judith Butler. Was that in Spanish, the interview in El País? No, I would not have been able to muscle through it if it was translated. But Foucault comes to America. He influences, and I'll just name a few, Judith Butler, Eve Kosaski-Sedgwick, Edward Said, Stephen Greenblatt. And they completely remake the study of the humanities for better and worse, right? You can argue both sides of it, but you can't argue that influence isn't huge because from them comes notions of queerness, notions of the closet, notions of gender performativity, obviously, that created a revolution, right? I mean, along the way to gay marriage, along the way to the normalization, quote unquote, of gay life in America. And we're in the midst of a gender revolution. I mean, again, like you could hate all of these developments, which clearly I don't. I'm on the hopefully very far end of the other side of that spectrum. But there's a reason why they are burning Judith Butler in effigy in Brazil. Okay, there's a reason why gender became the defining pivot point of the 2024 election in America. It's because philosophers had ideas, and those ideas entered into the public sphere and changed it. And so to not study it is simply to not see a color of the visual field or something. It's like not seeing what made your world what it is.
Yeah, something that's really struck me, having spent the 90s in grad school in Berkeley, in part with Judith Butler, being constantly told by, the media and probably other students in other disciplines as well, that what we were doing was some frou-frou thing up in the clouds. I'm amazed at the extent to which that kind of continental philosophy, I guess you'd call it postmodernism, that we were reading and studying at the time has trickled down into so much of the culture and the pop culture, even conversations like the ones we're having here, you know, and the endless kind of sometimes dumb deconstructions of, you know, everything from, you know, video games to TikToks or whatever, like that kind of language being sort of applicable to what you might consider a lower brow cultural product. That is now just par for the course,
it's
right?
Totally par for the course. So because all of us were trained in graduate programs in the 80s, 90s, and early aughts. All of us, I say all of us, but inordinately the people who end up at Slate, the New Yorker, the Atlantic, writing about culture got it when they were undergraduates.
Although for me, actually, my personal history with philosophy was that as an undergraduate, I didn't get it because I made the mistake. This is my big mistake in general as an undergraduate, and it's the advice I give to college students is every class is about the teacher and not the subject matter, you know? And at some point as an undergrad, I thought, well, philosophy, thinking about stuff, I like that. And I signed up for this class that turned out to be an analytic philosophy class. In the most narrow-minded, I mean, that can mean a lot of things, but this was sort of the worst thing it can mean, which is just this very narrow, sort of what Julia was talking about, you know, abstract notions, kind of divorced from contemporary reality, very much like language games. The teacher was not good. He was not winning at putting across this material. So the material wasn't interesting. The teacher wasn't interesting. And I thought, well, I guess I hate philosophy then. And it wasn't until I got to grad school and was suddenly surrounded by these incredible teachers reading, you know, amazing texts that I sort of learned that continental philosophy and other approaches could be a whole different ballgame.
Yeah, I just got to give you, Julia, before I punt it back to you, one more example. The United States looks like it does because the founding fathers read and revered John Locke, and they did so at a time when Europeans were moving away from Locke. And so our conception of freedom in this country, which arguably has deranged us, derives from Locke, whereas on the continent in Europe, Locke was basically abandoned and the idea of natural rights was abandoned. And so they have notions of positive freedom, i.e. the state should affirmatively do something to make you a healthy and well human being with ordinary life opportunities. Whereas in America, we have a concept of negative liberty, with part of the inheritance as written into our founding documents of Locke, whereby the state is just to the degree it leaves you alone to make of yourself what you will, including shooting your fellow men citizens because of the Second Amendment and, you know, no a priori right to anything, really. Healthcare, food, shelter. So that philosophy matters.
No, I'm not saying it doesn't matter. I hope I didn't sound like I was saying it doesn't matter. I don't think it doesn't matter at all. And I also want to speak up for the professor I had for my 200 level class, who I also took constitutional law from and who was an incredible and beloved professor at Brown, Nancy Rosenblum, who died a few years back. I guess, I mean, maybe this is just the limits of my powers of imagination. I often feel reading that kind of text, and it's been a long time, just the kind of constant need to like squint and hold the abstractions in one's mind. And the with some of those texts, it felt like the labor to do so really paid off. And you came out with like a theory of how the world hung together or could that was enticing. And then I felt like with some of those texts, all of that squinting and labor was like obfuscatory rather than communicative. Like it felt like thinkers hiding behind. I don't know. Just I do not mean to be pronouncing on the value of philosophy. I'm trying to recount my own encounters with it, which are that it is not what my brain wants to do. And I also think I'm not alone in that. And I guess I wonder, does it have to be considered, delivered, written in the way that it is? Because I feel like the way in which it's considered, written, and delivered is maybe, it makes it seem like a cloistered secret club of insight, which maybe makes it less available to people. If in fact it would be good for people to all understand it better, why is it so thorny?
I think that's a brilliant point. And I thought you were going to say, instead of insights, I thought you were going to say incels, because it can have that vibe. I think that it has gender parity. It's coming close. It was overwhelmingly men and very much a boys' club, but gender parity is arriving, I think, in philosophy, and it is improving in that regard. It is a far less like if you can understand this, you're in the boys club. And if you can't, that's losing that and becoming something much more conversational and vital. All right, here's one I know that we kind of want to get to in case people missed it the first time around. Brendan from Marin County writes in to say that he's really enjoying the new format where we switch co-hosting duties every week, but he feels like he missed the announcement about that. I'm sure he's not alone. What do we make of the change, and how's it going from our perspective, and what led us to it? Julia, you're you got a boss lady vibe to you, I'm just going to say, having actually been a boss. Walk us through it.
Yeah, we did announce it the first week we started it, but we kept it pretty low key. I think on the theory that you all know us all at this point, and Dana and I have both obviously hosted the show in weeks that Steve's been out in the past. And yeah, so we've been doing a rotation, and it's been really fun. I mean, for me, I really enjoy the weeks I host, and I enjoy the weeks that Dana and Steve host. And I'm enjoying that the rhythm is a little bit different than it has been in the past. The thing that is not surprising, but is really significant is like, it's so much harder to host. Like, Steve, thank you so much for hosting all the time for 15 years. Well, it's harder in the prep. Like when you're just the respondent, you kind of got to really immerse yourself in the stuff. You got to read about it. You got to think about it. You kind of got to have your little proto thoughts, but not think them too far so that they come out in an interesting and fresh way. But the sort of like all of the structure of like, how do I describe it? Why are we talking about it this week? Who released it again? What's the name of that actor? How do you pronounce it? Like, what am I highlighting that's interesting about why we're talking about it that teases the conversation without snuffing it out? Like, in advance, all that thinking takes a significant amount of work. And then in the moment, just figuring out how to, the kind of active listening of like, how do you bounce things off of each other and make the conversation lively? I don't know. It's just been like using new muscles. So it's been enjoyable. And I also enjoy like getting to hear Steve sooner in the mix, like I feel like when you're always hosting, then you sort of come around and are the like last word on the thing. And I don't know. I've been enjoying it. What do you guys think?
Yeah, different muscles is a good way to think about it. I had some resistance to it at first, just when the weeks that I host, because it is hard writing those little, summaries before each topic, knowing enough about the topic that you're sort of, the master of ceremonies about it. It's a different kind of prep. And it's not necessarily that you watch the things any differently. It's more that you have to step back and be able to frame each one articulately a couple times at the top of the show and then also again at the top of each segment. So I think I didn't really realize how much Steve had been putting into that all those years till suddenly I had to do it every third or fourth week myself. But I'm getting more used to it. I like it. I like getting to ask the first question. I kind of miss getting to give the first answer on movies. I kind of want to answer myself, But I think it's good for the show. I think it gives it a different energy when the three of us switch it up.
Oh, absolutely. I think it's been great for all the above reasons. I mean, you're each really wonderful hosts, each in your own way. And it's great to just have that variety of energy and on a week-to-week basis. Also, just conversely, it is, I have to say, I will own up to it. It is a lot easier to not host. And that is a relief in a way. I think it's easier in another sense too. And I'm curious what you guys think about it, which is that forgetting all the prep in the moment, you have to wear two hats simultaneously. And if you get the hat, which I do all the time, I get the hats kind of a little confused. And all of a sudden I'm pontificating when in fact what I should be doing is facilitating, or I stop listening because I'm starting to rehearse the thing that I want to say next. And you are the person to the extent anyone is. I mean, when it really works, nobody's in control of the flow, right? I mean, that's the whole thing. The Ouija board takes over and it's perfect. But, it's not always like that. And so you have an idea going in, maybe what kind of overall narrative you want the segment to tell and some sort of structural idea. But that's going to get rebuilt on the fly. It has to in the moment where you sense, okay, we haven't talked about this or that. Now, it's a collective effort too, because we can always pause a recording and someone says, wait a second, what about this? Or we need to pick up this, or on and on. So it's always been a collaborative effort, but there's just inevitably more responsibility for it if you're the.
It's also doing it every few weeks is kind of perfect because I feel like I carve it out and I can sort of commit like, okay, I'm keeping that Monday totally clear, and I'm going to try and get everything watched by like noon at the latest so that I can really get all my ducks in a row. The weeks when I really have it nailed, I make like a little roster where I like remind myself like who distributed it, who directed it, like cast, like the names, the actor names, the, you know, any interesting like technical people with interesting backgrounds that we might want to tuck into the convo, any info we have about the success of the show. Like I make a little, just so it's in my head, I like make a little structured note. And I feel like if I had to do it every week, I would just slide. Like I wouldn't be able to like
some of that, yeah.
keep up that level, but it's just often enough that I'm like, all right, it's my turn at the helm. I got to bring it.
And you both have. It's been really fun. All right. Well, I hope we did justice to all the wonderful questions that we got. I really enjoy not only the questions themselves, but just hearing the voice of the person that we've been talking to all these years. I love that aspect of it. So thank you so much for the collective hive effort here. And of course, Julia, it was always a really fun one. I don't know where the idea originated, but I'm glad we have kept it going.
Well, we'll see if I ever take this blindfold off in 2025, but I'm glad to have started it this way with you guys.
Dana, that was really fun.
Yeah, so fun. And the questions we didn't get to, just if you send us a question and you're sad we didn't get to it, we are going to keep them as a future font of possible Slate Plus topics. So we may well answer some of them in that format in the future.
Superb. Yeah, that's a great idea. All right. Well, you'll find links to some of the things we talked about today at our show page. That's slate.com/culturefest. And you can email us at culturefest@slate.com. Our introductory music is by the composer Nicholas Patel. Our production assistant is Kat Hong. Our producer is Jared Downing. For Dana Stevens and Julia Turner, I'm Stephen Metcalf. Thank you so much for joining us. We will see you soon.